Look at this. It's negative 25 billion as of the time we published the book. And now it's up to over 115 billion.
Wow.
It's insane how much this is growing.
Hello and welcome to this video. I've got Hibbard with me once again. And we, there was somebody in the comments a little while ago that put down that they only watch the videos until I mention the book. Well, we're going to be talking about the book, so you can stop watching right now. What we're going to do is update some charts in the book and see what has happened since. So, Alan, what have you got for me here?
Hey, Mike, I've got 3 charts, and I've got an old version and a new version for each one. So there's a total of 6. Basically, the theme here is the interest that the Federal Reserve is paying banks just to keep currency sitting around the system. So the first chart here actually has 3 things on it. The first thing to notice is probably the big red area, which is excess reserves. This is basically cash that banks have sitting in the system that they technically don't need to have there.
Okay? Yeah, this is their base currency. So it's bank reserves. These are the dollars that never get out into the public. You and I don't touch these dollars. It's a separate monetary system. I sort of look at banks now as, if this is the front of the bank and this is the back of the bank, they've got a brick wall in the middle. There's a completely separate monetary system on the back of the bank that is then connected to all of the checking accounts, the bank accounts that all of the banks have at the Federal Reserve. And they're moving behind that wall. Their monetary system is a bunch of bonds and base currency. And they're constantly trading bonds. And that's, they hold those on their balance sheet as assets. And they've got this base currency. And for decades and decades and decades, $40 billion was enough for the banks to do all of their end-of-day settlement, to borrow from each other and lend to each other and pay each other what they owe each other when deposits move around. And because of that wall, this big red area is sort of like the ash that is left over. If you burn something, there's ash. I wrote this in the book. If it rains, the streets are wet. If the streets are wet, it means it rained. That brick wall, when the Federal Reserve created bank reserve, they'd buy an asset like a bond from a brokerage house, but they can't pay the brokerage house because the brokerage house can't accept bank reserves. The brokerage house is not a bank. So they would pay the brokerage house's bank and instruct the bank to then create bank credit currency and deposit it into the account of the brokerage house. And so this red area is a reflection of all of the currency that was created by the Federal Reserve and pumped into the financial markets. More than $4 trillion at one point pumped into the financial markets. This is just what gets stuck in the system. And before that, the Federal Reserve called it the limited. The Federal Reserve made up some new language to make it sound like all of these excess reserves are on purpose. It was the limited reserves regime before 2008, and then after we started this all this craziness that Ben Bernanke started. It was called the ample reserves regime. and so they're just making up language to sort of cover their butts and not admitting that this excess, they aren't even excess reserves, they just call them reserve balances now. And they didn't pay interest on these excess reserves until 2008 when there was so much of them. So anyway, go ahead and I'm sorry I interrupted him with that rant, but I just thought people should have some background on this.
Yeah, it's all right, Mike. You're full of so much knowledge. I think everyone enjoys hearing it. And yeah, your point that the banking system basically functioned with only $40 billion in reserves is a good one. And we can see that here. We actually can't see it here because it's such a small amount. So there is a red line like a red area hidden behind this blue line, but it's so low we can't even see it.
Right.
And that goes back, indefinitely.
To the beginning of the Federal Reserve, right?
Exactly. Yeah, 1913. So then in 2008, that's when
November of 1914 is when they opened their doors for business. So the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913. So
that's right. Yeah, December of 1930. Yeah, exactly. More information. So anyways, in the 2008 financial crisis, that's when this red area effectively starts. And to your point, yes, that's also when the Fed began paying interest on the excess reserves. So basically, this is just extra currency that the Fed pays the banks just to have currency.
Right. So the Federal Reserve shoved all this onto their balance sheets, and they didn't actually want all of these excess reserves. And in order to make it so that the banks did want them, Ben Bernanke decided to pay them interest on this free currency that the Fed creates and shoves on their balance sheets, and it gets stuck there.
Exactly. And we can see the overall process of the Fed raising this rate in a stair-step fashion, essentially paying the banks a higher and higher and higher interest rate until about 2019. And again, this just gets completely out of hand. It's basically paying the banks just to keep a bunch of cash in their system so that the banking system doesn't implode. And you got to wonder, I mean, if you're the average person, you got to wonder, well, where does the Fed get this currency to just pay the banks to have currency? Like, are they just printing it out of thin air? And that's kind of what we want to talk about next.
Okay.
So actually, first, let me
keep on going with the rates and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the chart that we had in the book, and we have since updated it, and it looks like this. So you can
go back to the first one again, and then back to this one, so the audience can see the interest rate line.
I'll go back and forth. Keep your eye on this blue line shooting up to the moon. This is the new one, and here's where it was in the book, only about 1.5%, and then the new one, we're up over 5.5%.
Yeah, it's 5.33 right now is the effective Fed funds rate. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Now, I want to let everybody know that that when they're doing QE and when they take interest rates down to zero, the public experiences this boom and things are great. And then the Fed does tightening. And so they raise interest rates and they make it tough on the public, but it rains free currency on the banks. I mean, just incredible piles of cash going to the banks. So continue on with your analysis here.
Yeah, so basically this rate is going higher and higher, and you got to wonder, like, where does this currency come from? Like who's paying for it essentially? And the basic principle here is they keep inventing these new mechanisms that sound complicated, but at the end of the day, there's only one place it can come from, and it's the people who actually make stuff in the economy. It's regular people. It's the private sector. That's it. That's the only place that wealth can ever come from. It's working hard, creating new things that people actually want to buy. Everything else is smoke and mirrors. It's technical jargon. So all of this currency that's being paid to the banks is ultimately coming out of your pocket, either in the form of taxation or inflation, higher prices. It's just a matter of time before we all pay for it.
Right. Yeah.
So that leads me into the next chart, which was in the book. This is the cumulative interest that's been paid to banks.
Hi, I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for subscribing and mention that if you'd like to help our channel, please consider my company, GoldSilver.com, the next time you buy precious metals. We're one of the most trusted names in the industry. Our prices are sharp, delivery is fast, and we have an insiders program where you find out exactly what I'm doing with my own investments. Thanks for making GoldSilver.com your dealer. And now back to the video.
So that leads me into the next chart, which was in the book. This is the cumulative interest that's been paid to banks.
So it looks like about 220 billion at that point when the book was published, just over a year ago.
Yep, exactly. So for the most part, the simplified calculation is basically taking the amount of reserves that the banks have and multiplying it by the interest rate. And that's how you get the amount that they're paid. And then you just add it up over time, and this gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're at about 220 billion as of the time the book came out. And now it's over 350 billion.
Wow.
So from 220 to 350, $350 billion paid to the banks just to keep the existing financial system afloat. That's coming out of our pockets, like indirectly.
Right. Isn't it amazing how Ben Bernanke, he isn't Fed chairman anymore, but he is still so magnanimous because this is a gift from him to the banks, and it's all being stolen from the public, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a nice guy.
And he won the Nobel Prize for all of these policies that will eventually drag down the world economy. I mean, this is going to eventually, these policies that he started are going, when the implosion really happens, he will have broken the world economy. One man's decisions, one man's ideas. It's very, very dangerous. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's why I think you shouldn't give any one person that much power, because they might get it wrong. They might screw it up.
Right. He is so incredibly arrogant. And I remember a 60 Minutes interview right after the global financial crisis of 2008. And the interviewer asked, how confident are you that you can get normalize the balance sheet, get the balance sheet back down of the Fed? And he goes, 100%. He was absolutely positive that he could get out of this trap that he created, and he can't. The only way that we can get out is by chewing off our own foot.
Yeah, not good, not good.
Right.
So anyways, just to continue the sort of train of logic here and like following the money, or in this case, currency. So basically, where does the Fed get all this? Creates it out of thin air like everything else. And so what are the implications? The next step would be for the federal government. So the Federal Reserve, when it turns a profit, it owes that profit back to the Treasury. And
after it deducts all of its expenses and the 6% dividend for all of the shareholders, which are all the member banks of the Federal Reserve System.
yes,
So it deducts those first, anything left over. So all of the assets that it buys are things that are guaranteed by the U.S. government and pay interest. So these are profit-making assets, cash-flowing assets that it buys by typing a number. It just types a number into existence and buys that asset, which is usually a U.S. Treasury and a small percentage of mortgage-backed securities. And so for us to have currency in circulation, we have to pay taxes in the future to pay those U.S. Treasuries and your mortgage payment. A portion of it goes to pay for the currency that's in existence, plus to make this gift that Ben Bernanke gave to the banks.
exactly. And so as a result, almost every year, the Federal Reserve makes a profit and then owes whatever's left after these, mandatory dividends and whatever else.
Yeah.
They owe whatever is left to the Treasury. They give that to the U.S. government and say, okay, here's what's left. You keep it. And so almost every fiscal year, there's a small profit that gets sent to the Treasury. But
which then would reduce the national debt, or it means that they don't have to issue as many future Treasury bills, notes, and bonds, right?
Exactly. And so ordinarily, that's how things operate. But very recently, things flipped, and the Fed didn't turn a profit. It now has a massive loss. This massive red area down here. Look at this. It's negative 25 billion as of the time we published the book. And now it's up to over 115 billion.
Wow.
It's insane how much this is growing. Now it's the U.S. government. Now it's the taxpayer that owes the private banking system. Like the U.S. government, the Treasury now owes the Fed over 115 billion. That's why it's so backwards.
But since they don't pay them because they're not supposed to, it just keeps on stacking up. And so in order for that red line to start to vanish, for it to reduce, we either need to change the system, or the Fed will change the way they measure the system, which they do a lot, or things have to fall apart. One of the things that you see in all of these graphs is that we're in the middle of this slow motion train wreck, and everything has gone out of control since 2008, and they haven't been able to get things back under control. They keep on trying different stuff, but it's just not working.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. When you have a system that's fundamentally based on promises that are empty, and you can just keep stacking promises on top of promises, that can go on much longer than people think. And
right.
That's just what we're seeing happening. It's just promises on top of promises with new made up language to describe each type of promise. But at the end of the day, there's nothing there.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on these charts?
This scares me.
It scares me too.
It's unprecedented. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just doing an interview with Chris Martenson, and he was talking about anxiety, and so many people are waking up at 3 and 3:30 in the morning, which I do all the time. And the anxiety when we were writing this book was just stacking up to where it was huge, and it's depressing to go over this data all the time. Anyway, so I want to thank you for presenting all of this update, and I want to thank all the viewers for watching. Please smash that like, subscribe, and the notification bell. We'll see you next time.
Hi, I just wanted to tell you about GoldSilver's 111-ounce silver giveaway, where you can win 111. One 1-ounce silver bar, one 10-ounce silver bar, and one 100-ounce silver bar. So enter today and win.